There's a reason you keep falling back into anxiety, stress, and burnout, even when your mind tells you everything's fine. I'm going to tell you a hard truth. Your nervous system does not trust you. That's because you spent years overriding your body's signals just to get through the day. But today, I'll show you why that happens and how you can start to rebuild that trust one step at a time. So let's get into it. First, I want to talk about mindset. Mindset is such a powerful tool. If we can fill our mind with gratitude or love or the ways of being in which we want to achieve that day or success or a target that we have, if we can visualize it, if we can see it, that's a great step in making it real. In fact, I would say without mindset, it's very challenging to heal, to improve, to perform better. But sometimes mindset is just not enough. It works a lot better if the nervous system is regulated in a way that the body can follow what the mind is telling it to do. Think of it, a metaphor I can use is think of the nervous system like the soil and the mindset like a seed. You could have the greatest seed in the world, but if you don't have fertile soil that's healthy and nutrient, the seed's not going to grow or it's not going to grow well. And over the years, I've worked with many high achieving people that can accomplish so much in the world, but often would find themselves not being satisfied with the results, not because the results weren't great, because they didn't feel good about them. They maybe had a huge goal that they were trying to achieved it, and then felt like it wasn't enough, or moved right into the excitement of pursuing and getting the goal or the achievement into the fear of losing it. And that's a tough place to be. The mindset of success may have got them there, but there's something going on deeper that isn't allowing them to be present with the goals that they've achieved. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to perform even better the next time or go further or get a bigger goal. But when they kind of get on this treadmill of what's next without ever enjoying what is, they may have the trappings of life, but sometimes the quality of life isn't there. And these things are not mutually exclusive. I mean, it's not that you have to trappings of life to be okay. It's a matter of finding both. How can I meet what I define as success in my life and be able to be present with it and ultimately enjoy it? And so mindset gets us partway there, a long way there. But we want to be able to restructure the nervous system in a way that the individual has agency to be able to regulate it. I am convinced, I've seen it over and over again, that our chief problem as human beings is that we confuse discomfort with threat and respond to that discomfort as if it's threat. So when a problem arises, we may think our way, and that's a version of mindset too. It's just an unconscious, automatic mindset that is often formed in our history in the ways that we'll think about things, good or bad, take neutral events and think about them in such a way that now I'm going to survival mode or some version of fight, flight, or freeze when it's not called for, and our perception of the events that are happening can establish that kind of unconscious automatic mindset. That's not the mindset I'm talking about that helps us grow and heal and get better and achieve. It's the way in which our nervous system, our body, and our brain has been set through our history that we have these certain beliefs about ourselves, the world, and the place in it. And then we perceive things maybe not as they are, but as we were. And so, like I said, with those people that I've worked with that have achieved so much, they can use mindset. And if they were able to use mindset, if they're coming to me, oftentimes there's a challenge that they're dealing with. It doesn't have to be something as acute as addiction, but it may be that they've been able to be a success by all metrics in their business, but they're having trouble keeping relationships together or being a parent. That they're really great with transactional relationships, but not so great with vulnerable relationships. And if they were able to think their way through it, they would. So this doesn't mean mindset's wrong. It's just not always enough. Healing requires both a top-down, which we could say is mindset and how we think, and a bottom-up approach, which we could say is our nervous system and the ability that we have to regulate that. I started off by saying your nervous system doesn't trust you. So where does that distrust begin? As I started to talk about our nervous system and in the way that we respond to events that we might see as threatening. And first, let me say, One of the reasons that our chief problem, or maybe the main reason that I see our chief problem as that we confuse discomfort with threat and respond to it as if it is so, is that we're wired to look for threat. We're wired to look for danger. It's more important for me to know if you're coming at me with a knife or a fist than you are to give me a hug. While a hug might be really important for me, base level survival is more important than anything else, right? We talk about the base levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He talks about actualization, self-actualization is at the top, but the base of it is basic survival needs. And if those aren't met, we can't then go out in the world and achieve and make connections and feel loved and become self-actualized. We have to start with survival. So part of our brain and our nervous system is programmed in a way to see threat. And I view that it's binary. It's not making the decision for us, and we don't want it. We want that part of us to be automatic and unconscious. You'll often hear of it referred to as the reptilian brain. So if you see an alligator, I live in Florida by the Everglades, they pretty much look like they're either off or on. They're either moving really slowly and just kind of being there, or they're attacking and eating. They live kind of either in stillness or activation, right there. I'm not suggesting we get rid of that part of our brain, but we need to understand that there is a part of us that pretty much all day long is looking for threat. It's just kind of scanning threat, not threat. And we don't want that part to discern for us. In fact, I want that part when there is actual threat to take over and get me to safety for the time that needs to occur to get me to safety. And then I can worry about nervous system regulation, feeling safe, reconnecting with myself, reconnecting with others. But those things really only happen in moments. I mean, of course, there are scenarios where people are in survival-based situations for extended periods of time. We could make a list of those. But on a day-to-day basis, most people aren't in life-threatening situations all day long. In fact, probably the most dangerous thing we do all day long is get in a piece of metal and drive fast down the road, hoping that another car is not going to cross this thin white line by some agreement we've made and crash into us. And I don't say that to be scary, but most people aren't terrified of driving all day. And so we'll see people maybe not get into survival mode while driving, although road rage is an actual thing, but that same person may be at home and their kids react a certain way, or their spouse looks at them a certain way, or something doesn't go right at work and they fly off the handle, whether that's externally being angry and yelling and screaming, or going internal and kind of shutting down and disappearing. So we're meant to go in these survival states for the moments that we need to be in survival. But again, most of us aren't in a need for survival all day long. But I think if we're honest with ourselves and really take a look, we'll find that we do respond in that survival state. I often think of like when I'm walking along and come to a step, and maybe it's getting towards evening and there's a shadow at this step, and I go to step on it, but I miss the step because I thought the shadow was the step, and I start to fall. And in that moment, my entire body kind of mobilizes getting ready to fall. I would argue that my body and my nervous system doesn't know the difference between that fall right there of maybe 6 inches that I stumble a bit and then stand back up, or if I actually just fall on the ground and fall a few feet. I don't think that the brain and nervous system and body really know the difference between that and if I were to step off a 10-story building, which hopefully I never do. It is just mobilizing for that threat in the moment. Now, if the nervous system is regulated, I'm going to hit that step and feel that energy come up, feel that sense of reaction, like I'm not okay. And then I'm going to hit the step, realize I'm okay, and go on about my day. If my nervous system is completely dysregulated, I may hit that step and then not be able to function for the rest of the day, or snap at the next person that sees me, or be scared of getting in the car or something else. It doesn't always have to be a straight line between the event that happened and what triggered me and events from my past, but it could just be, that now I'm completely dysregulated to where even my sleep might be disturbed, or I'm having intrusive thoughts. Usually people don't have something with maybe something that small, but some people do. It depends on their history. So our history has shaped our nervous system to determine what is threat and what isn't. So if you grew up in an environment where there was a lot of chaos, maybe verbal abuse, maybe neglect, where in the home, the nervous system was looking to survive. And maybe the person didn't even realize that was happening because that was just the home that they were in. But just to be able to get attention or to be safe, they had to be in some sort of survival mode, which gets set. And again, the person may not even realize that's there. They may be people that then later in life can live with a high amount of stress. But that means their nervous system is at such a heightened state often that a little thing happens and they kind of blow up, again, internally or externally, and maybe even feel like they're falling apart. So our nervous system gets shaped by the events that we experience in our history. And that's not only in childhood. However, in childhood, that's a period of our life where we're really learning, our brain is forming, it's developing, and we're learning about who we are and our place in the world. You know, our relationships with our primary caregivers really establish the first relationships we have with men and women, and with our siblings. And we start to learn how to be safe in those relationships. And if there's rupture in those relationships, we learn to navigate around them. And if that's not later on in life resolved in some way, and the nervous system still continues to use the adaptation that it had to survive and live through the events of your past, then you grow up using that adaptation in situations where that adaptation is not required. So for instance, a baby that is completely neglected, you know, it has to yell and scream just to get fed or get attention. You know, that baby needs to do that because as a baby, it can't survive. If left alone for long enough, it will perish. It can't feed itself, it can't protect itself. That changes as the child develops, and grows. But that baby, if it needs to scream and yell for that attention that it needs just to survive, may continue to do that as a pattern in its relationships with its caregivers. And again, if that's not resolved later in life, when they feel like they're going to be left or their needs aren't going to be met, they may throw a tantrum. You know, with a baby, it's understandable, but when you're a 45 or 50-year-old man or woman, that tantrum doesn't really help in building relationships. And that tantrum might not look the same way as a baby's tantrum. It might become very polished and become it might exhibit itself as control or manipulation rather than yelling or screaming, but it's still there as that adaptation. That a person unconsciously is just experiencing that their needs aren't going to be met. They're not going to be okay. And it triggers that same sense of if I'm not okay, then I may perish if my needs aren't met. Now, as an adult, you really can't be abandoned in the same way or neglected in the same way as a child could. You know, if my parents, I'm almost 50, my parents are still alive, if they decided to never talk to me again, I would be devastated. It would not feel good, but I wouldn't be devastated in a way that I would perish. I might feel like that internally, but I could still care for myself. Now, I may feel like that, and a signal if something like that happens, and I work through the process of grieving it, but it just won't go away, and I stay stuck in it, or the person stays stuck in it for a long time, then that points to maybe a shaping or an experience of trauma early on that has the nervous system go into a state of survival, and they feel like their needs aren't met. So that person grows up with their nervous system and directing their brain and the shapings of their history, directing their brain to perceive something as threat. But they also maybe have a part of them that's matured, can see the world and know that they're not really at threat, and can almost see that, hey, I'm reacting to this event as if it's something that's going to hurt or kill me or destroy me. And I know it's not, but I can't seem to stop acting that way. You know, that's where the mind is telling, hey, I'm okay, but my nervous system is still going into fight or flight. And this is where we come back to just, where, mindset and affirmations are great, but they're not going to get the person all the way there. Imagine if someone was drowning and instead of throwing them a life raft, you said, think positive thoughts, see yourself getting to the shore. But if this person doesn't know how to swim and they're in that state of just trying to live, the body's going to take over, the nervous system is going to take over, that part of what we call the reptilian brain is going to take over, and they're not going to be able to think their way through it. And this can happen in very subtle ways in people's daily lives. It sounds dramatic to say someone's drowning, but lots of people I talk to when they're having problems in their relationships, or maybe even problems with addictive behaviors, or problems being a parent, they might say to me, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like I'm not going to be okay. And I'm not going to be okay, if we carry that out far enough, is really, it's a thought of, I'm not going to live. And people might not have that in their consciousness each day, but that kind of brings our anxiety to a level of death anxiety if we carry it out far enough. And most of the time, when I can carry a fear out far enough with somebody, they feel like either they or somebody that they love is not going to be okay, or not going to be safe, or maybe not make it. And so that distrust happens because your mind is telling you one thing and your body's telling you something completely different. And the body, I think 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 times out of 10, without some ability to regulate the nervous system, is going to win. And that's great for actual survival situations, but causes problems when there's not. And, I used to have an office in a multi-story building. And if I was in that building and there was a fire, and I saw the fire, and I realized that everybody around me didn't see that fire, and I knew that fire, the alarms aren't going off, and I know that fire is going to burn down the building. And so I am the only one that sees it. I start running and grabbing people. I pull them down the stairs because the elevators aren't working. I'm pulling them by the hair. I'm pushing them. They're yelling and screaming at me. But finally, I get these 10 people downstairs and outside, and they look back, and the building engulfs in flames, and they would have lost their lives. Now, they're going to look at me. Maybe they were really mad at me for what I was doing, but now they're going to realize that I got them to safety. I'm going to be a hero. But I take that same scenario, and for whatever reason in my perception, I see something happening and I see it as a fire, and I am sure there's a fire there. I'm sure of it. But there isn't. But I'm sure of it. That's my perception. There's a fire that's going to burn this building down, and I do the same thing. I grab these 10 people one at a time. I pull them down the stairs. I'm pushing them. I'm grabbing them by the hair. I get them downstairs. I'm not going to be a hero for this one. I'm going to get arrested or sent to a psych ward. They're going to look at me like I'm insane. And that started with that perception of threat. And every step I took after that perception of threat made sense if that threat were real, but that threat wasn't. And I would challenge you to look in your lives and see where this can happen on a daily basis. If I were walking across the street with a friend and a car was about to hit me and I didn't see it, I'd want them to shove me out of the way, or they'd want me to shove them out of the way if they didn't see it. That's not a problem. If I go into survival mode, then I don't want to see a car barreling down at me, sit in the lotus position and start to meditate and worry about and care about the driver, or set my mind in a certain way. I want to get out of the way. The problem happens if I go home and my kids say something or my wife does something and I react to them like they're a car about to hit me. And seeing that threat isn't always about like it's as dramatic as a fire. If one of my kids does something, they're behaving in a certain way. And I've got little ones. I've got an older one and little ones. And say my 6-year-old is behaving in a certain way that I can see her. And I'm a therapist. I understand child development, but I can look at how she's interacting with her brothers or her friends, and I can start carrying that out. If she keeps acting like that until she's a teenager, nobody's going to like her. She's not going to be accepted, and she's going to have all these problems. And I start reacting now to that thing that's down the road 10, 15 years versus what's happening here. Now that thing has a lot more weight. It's a lot more important to me to address. And I might get really excited or upset. And really, I maybe just needed to be there with her for a little bit. And there would be time to talk to her later about her behavior, which is important. But I don't need to react to that perceived threat that's way down the road. Or sometimes that perceived threat is from my history, and I see them reacting in a certain way that I wasn't successful with, and I get worried about that. And this can happen in all facets of life. And I say it shows up in all facets of life and on a daily basis, and I challenge you to look. And you might not be able to see, and sometimes people aren't able to see what the instances are and the behaviors are. They can't see where that fire is, but maybe we can see where the smoke is. And that smoke might be overreacting, finding yourself angry, whether you're expressing that anger outwardly or inwardly, addictive behaviors, codependency, needing others to be okay, being people pleasing. right? People pleasing and codependency is it's not really about caring for the other person. When it comes to that level of acuity, it's that I need you to be okay in order for me to be okay. And I'm not okay with anything being out of place. You're thinking something about me. And now I'm having a relationship with you that isn't even you. It's about my projection of you. That kind of stuff is exhausting. And if you find yourself doing that, not able to sit still, not be able to, always needing to be on the move, these types of things can point to a nervous system that's dysregulated, and it's not an accusation. It's to be able to understand, because over time, without some sort of ability to manage it or tools, the nervous system will dysregulate after experiencing events in the world. I think it's very similar to a car that's driving down the road. Over time will get out of alignment. And sometimes it gets out of alignment quicker because it hits a curb or runs off the road. But eventually you need to take it in for maintenance. How can we begin rebuilding that trust with the body? And first, it starts with building a relationship with your body. One of the things that I talk with my clients about all the time is not just, to try to, if you're upset, not to just figure it out that you're upset. If you're angry or anxious, they might have a million reasons why they are. And some of them might be right, but some of them, they might be completely off. I think a great first step is when you realize that you're experiencing that anxiety or that anger, stop and check in with your body and just notice what you're experiencing. Notice sensations, notice temperature, notice tightness. Just notice it without doing anything to change it. Notice your breath without doing anything to change it, and see what happens as you notice it. This can help in de-identifying you from the behavior or the emotion. So rather than you saying, and this isn't about beating up language, but rather than like when someone says, I am angry, that's oftentimes when we start to deconstruct it, it's like they are the anger when they are the one experiencing the anger. And this mindset isn't just about the language, but first deconstructing that in a way that I am the one experiencing that anger. And it's not even anger, it's sensation in my body. I'm labeling it as anger, and that's helpful, or anxiety. That's helpful to be able to understand how to work with it after I'm able to be with it, but really start to know what that is in your body. It's tightness in my chest. It's fat, rapid breathing. My ears are hot. My stomach's upset. Okay. Now I'm experiencing a set of sensations. And as I experience those, eventually they'll change. There isn't a set of sensations, a set of emotion, an emotional state that hasn't changed. It's like we're experiencing weather. And when you experience, if you went outside and it was pouring down rain, you wouldn't say, I am the storm. You'd say, it's raining and I'm getting wet. And if you stood there long enough, the rain would pass. Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it's dangerous to be out there and you have to go inside. But if you stood there long enough, it'll pass. It's not going to stay unless you start following it and grabbing onto it and trying to. And we do that by saying, I don't want to feel this way. I can't do this. I got to get it to change. And the more that we do that, it creates even more frustration and maybe more anxiety and more anger. And now we've got anxiety or anger about the anxiety or anger, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. As an old man once said to me, your biggest problem is not your biggest problem. Your biggest problem is how you think and feel about your biggest problem. Think and feel. So we do need to think differently about it, but we also want to train our nervous system to be able to regulate. Peace is not, in my mind, about being in a complete state of calmness all the time. It's about being able to weather that storm and navigate it when it comes. That's easy to say, not easy to do. Real inner peace is being able to sit in the middle of that fire, proverbial fire. Although if you look up self-immolation, there were these Buddhist monks around the Vietnam conflict that would sit in a lotus position, douse themselves with gasoline, and light themselves on fire and never move until they burned to death. I think about that often, not in a morbid way, but to think if they are capable of that, or we're capable of that, to remain still in the middle of that, of actually being burned alive. That's the human body is capable of that. Then I can withstand a middle seat on an airplane when the air conditioning's out and my kid won't stop screaming. I'm capable of withstanding that. And so we want to use a set of tools, both proactive and reactive, in order to begin to train the nervous system. Proactive tools are ones you schedule, and reactive tools are ones that you're going to use in the moment where you find yourself in reaction. So Proactive tools and reactive tools can be the same thing. There can be types of breath, types of meditation, types of movement. But chances are, if you're really in a reaction, you're not going to lay down on a mat and do a 30-minute yoga class or a 15-minute yoga nidra. You're going to need some tools in those moments to weather that storm without leaving the storm. If you're in a meeting in the office and you're triggered by something, you're probably not going to excuse yourself to go do a meditation or go for a run. You need to stay in the meeting. You probably know in your head it's not really unsafe. It might just feel that way. And so you need some techniques that you can use in a reactive, tools that you can use in that reactive state. Proactive is great because you're going to schedule something. I'm going to do something in the morning, in the evening, or maybe throughout the day. And I'm a big fan of like micro breath work and micro meditations where maybe you're just taking 7 breaths or breathing for a minute, kind of like a TV commercial. And people can do that throughout the day. You say, when I get up, I do it. Before I leave the house, when I get in the car, when I get out of the car, before a meeting, after a meeting. You could schedule it like that based on the daily events you have, or you could schedule it based on time and set a timer for it. Other proactive things are like going to a class or to therapy, to an EMDR session, to church for spirituality or another spiritual practice, meeting friends for coffee, things that you have scheduled that support you in regulating. And when you do those things over time, it raises that capacity. And it also when we're in reaction, that allows us to understand that we can get through these moments that are tough, and that helps us build capacity. But I'm going to just give you a couple things today. So there's some very simple breath tools that you can use. One many people have heard of is the box breath, which is just breathing 4 in, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding for 4, and repeat. Do that 7 times. It might take you 2 minutes, maybe a minute and a half. And it can change your state so quickly that the problem may not go away or the challenge may not go away, but your perception of it may go away. And that's when you can then employ in your mindset tools. One of my favorites is it's a yogic breath called the Shitali breath. And it is very simple. You breathe in through your nose. And then as you exhale through softly pursed lips, as if you're gently blowing through a straw. And it's very gentle. You're not breathing in heavy and breathing out hard. You're breathing in through your nose and then exhaling through the straw. And as you repeat this, make each inhale deeper and each exhale more complete, trying to make the exhale longer than the inhale. That exhale is the key. That exhale will help activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which brings about rest and digest and regulation. Sympathetic nervous system is in control of fight or flight. And if you've been in that and it's activated, you don't want to just come out of that. That's very hard. You want to activate the other part of the nervous system, the parasympathetic. So that breath is very simple to do and can bring you into that state very quickly. Just breathing in through the nose and out through the straw. Repeat it 7, 8, 10 times. That might be 2 or 3 minutes. As you practice this, you'll find that after a while, after the first breath, you'll begin to settle and you move out of fight or flight and into the state where you can use mindset, you can use discernment, you can determine, not automatically and unconsciously, but you regain agency and can determine what your actions are next. Healing is relational, and we can find healing in relating to others, relating to a therapist or a coach, relating to friends or family, relating to mentors. But before that, or along with that, building a new relationship with your body to really understand what's going on. And then you can start to even predict some of the ways that you're feeling based on what you're sensing in your body. I mean, we call them feelings because we feel them. We don't really feel things in our brain. We don't really have the nerve endings to even do it. We feel it in our body. Now, we might have thoughts that drive that feeling, but the body takes over and the nervous system engages, and we start to engage with what we see as threat or perceive as threat. And as we can build a new relationship with our body, build a new relationship with our nervous system, expand the ability to experience discomfort, really build distress tolerance, then we can really begin to change our lives, to transform in a way that allows us to not only go after our goals and meet them, but to be present with them and enjoy them. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm here to serve.